Planning your wedding day can be super stressful. It's like, where do I start? I don't know what I'm doing. All my friends have different suggestions. My parents have different suggestions. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm going to give you kind of a couple of different tips and things to think about. What are the things that are going to affect the timeline in addition to sample timelines? So, here are the three things you really need to consider first when you are creating a timeline. First look, are you going to have one? You have to decide first. Sunset photos, do you want those? What time is the sunset? And then a second shooter, do you want to have two photographers capturing your wedding, or do you want to only have one? So let me tell you about the reasons you would have all of these things. So reasons to have a sunset photo is because it's beautiful lighting, gorgeous photos, and you also have time to decompress and spend quality time with your significant other. So during the reception, you're going to be surrounded by so many people that want to talk to you because all of your closest friends and family are going to be there. So, if you're more introverted or get overwhelmed with something like that, having time for sunset photos is just so helpful to kind of like take yourself away from that situation and just take a deep breath and enjoy each other again and enjoy the reason why you did all this planning and all that stuff. So, that's a reason to have sunset photos in addition to just gorgeous light. So, if you want sunset photos, I want you to Google when the sun will set on your wedding day. So, for example, Google, when will the sun set in Speculator, New York on August 2nd? It'll give you an exact time. And it doesn't matter if it's a year or two in advance or something like that, it will give you an exact time. Google is so helpful for that. And then I want you to carve out at least 15 minutes for your sunset photos and starting about an hour and a half before the sun sets. So, for example, if the sun sets in Speculator at 8 on August 2nd, set aside 6:30 to 6:45 for your sunset photos, and you're going to build your timeline around those sunset photos. It's going to be taken either right after the ceremony if you're like in the spring or fall time frame, or in the middle of the reception for summer. So it really just depends on your season and where kind of that sunset photo time will be taken out. Reasons to have a first look. So you get 40% more portraits. There are different varieties at different stages. You are able to enjoy the surprise freely. So, what I say to my couples is on the ceremony day, if you're going to not have a first look and you want to see your significant other when they walk down the aisle for the first time, it's amazing and great. But some people, not everyone, some people who are stage fright or just get like overwhelmed with a lot of people staring at them, well, the guy will be like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many people staring at me. Oh my gosh, they're waiting for a reaction. This moment, they've been waiting for this moment. This is usually like the biggest moment." And then you kind of have a hard time showing any emotion because you're just so stressed because everyone else is staring at you. So you might not have that cry or that like big emotion that maybe your significant other was looking for or you thought you were going to have. It doesn't always happen that way, but a lot of times it does. So when you have a first look, you're able to enjoy the surprise freely because it's literally just you and your almost soon to be spouse, which is amazing. You can extend your day. So you can have just like time to take your first look photos, time for your reception, time for the ceremony. It makes things less go, go, go. Like, you can enjoy your cocktail hour. So that's also a big thing too, is if you are taking photos, like your couples photos and your family photos after the ceremony, you don't get to enjoy your cocktail hour. And then your friends and family are there just like talking with each other and not talking with you, which is totally fine and it's okay. But if you want to enjoy your cocktail hour and want to have that food, if you tried those hors d'oeuvres and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to have those and I want to enjoy those, that's another reason to do that. You can also have a smoother timeline. So if we get the majority of the photos done for you before the ceremony, you're just going to enjoy your reception so much more. That's just how it is. You don't have to worry. You don't have to keep thinking about things. You don't have to have someone keep tapping you on the shoulder, being like, now it's time for this when you weren't ready for it. So it just really makes things smoother. And also, it diminishes nerves. So if you've already seen your significant other, if you've already talked to them, caught up with them, and stuff like that, you are able to be a little bit less nervous. It's nerve wracking still, but you already saw them. It makes you feel better. You're like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And I've seen that happen a lot of times for a first look. I'm very biased towards the first look. There are reasons to have a traditional ceremony. and it just depends on your personal preference. So if you want a first look, figure out your ceremony time. What time are you having your ceremony? Add in half an hour of wiggle room between the end of your photos and the ceremony time, because when in doubt, something always goes over timeline, or you're just going to be so go, go, go that once you're done with the photos, you're going to want to have a couple of moments to just take a deep breath. Add 2 hours to get your first look, your couples portraits, your wedding party photos, and your family portraits done before the ceremony. So just have like a 2 hour chunk. Um, so you should have your dress and all of your getting ready photos, all of that stuff done 2 hours before the ceremony. And then, so like, for example, if your ceremony is at 4 p.m., your first look is going to be at 1:30. And then we're going to get all the main photos done by 3:30 so you can enjoy the rest of your day. So I guess it's 2.5 hours to get the portraits done before the ceremony if you have that half an hour of wiggle room. Okay, so reasons to have a second shooter. So if you have a large wedding party, so 7 or more on each side, it's just helpful to have another set of hands. To have another set of people's, like, or another person to be able to take those individual and group wedding party photos on their own while I do my stuff with the bride and her bridal party. If you don't have a wedding coordinator, it's so helpful to have another set of hands. I use my second shooters. If there's no wedding coordinator, I use my second shooters to help with family photos. They call out people, they get groupings together. They'll grab things for me, grab things for the couple. It's just helpful to have just another person to run around and do some things like that. If you have two different getting ready locations, I can't necessarily go to both of them for getting ready unless you have me there for a long period of time. So having a second shooter is helpful because they can go to one, they can go to the groom's area, I can go to the bride's area, and then we meet up right before the ceremony. And then another one is a good drive between the ceremony and the reception. Just again, timeline stuff. Having a second shooter is just so helpful when you're driving and coordinating and doing all that stuff. And then the other reason, which is just a personal preference, is if you want more candid shots throughout the day. So when I'm taking my photos, I am thinking about the couple and what the couple wants, and I'm making sure that I'm getting the couple's emotions and reactions. And I'm going to try to get a lot of emotions and reactions from the guests as well, but there's only so much I can do. So if you have a second shooter, it's just so helpful to have another set of eyes. Having another person with another perspective, just it's really cool to be able to see what types of photos they get. So if you want more candid shots throughout the day, if you're really into a documentary style feel, that is also really helpful to have a second shooter. So if you have a second shooter, they can take photos while I am, and they can shorten your timeline. And this will decrease the amount of time to capture getting ready photos for up to a half hour. In regards to timeline, I would say this is more on a case-by-case basis as to how it affects your timeline specifically, but it's helpful for a photographer like me to know that you do want a second shooter so we can factor that into your timeline. So take a deep breath. Here's a sample timeline with a first look, sunset photos, and a second shooter. I'm not going to go through all of it, but the general cadence of a wedding is getting the details, having the hair and makeup get done with the getting ready photos, your first look, portraits, wedding party, family. Then you take a breather, you have the ceremony, take a couple of just married portraits, your reception begins, sunset photos, photo coverage ends. That is kind of the general cadence of what a wedding, a normal, typical wedding looks like, although no wedding is typical. And then here's a sample timeline without a first look or sunset photos with a second shooter. So I'm going to have these on a PDF for you guys so you guys can look through them a little bit more, but that's just like a way to help you get started. Hopefully that's helpful.